saw my husband cheating with the younger intern after 3 years of marriage, so I disclosed him at our anniversary party. I'm Carla, a 32-year-old woman, and I've been married to my now-estranged husband, Evan, who's 35, for 3 years. We actually met 5 years ago during our last year of college, and we were the quintessential college sweethearts that everyone thought would last forever. We dated through those awkward post-grad years and eventually tied the knot. When we first started dating, we had that classic power couple vibe. Evan was ambitious and had just launched a tech company, while I took care of everything at home to support him. Initially, it seemed like we had it all. Evan was thriving as the CEO of his startup, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect couple with our big house and luxurious vacations. But over the last year, things began to shift. Evan started to grow distant. He was always working late or whisked away on sudden business trips. I noticed he'd buy new clothes, yet I never saw him wear them. His phone seemed permanently attached to his hand, and if I even glanced at it, he'd get defensive. I never thought he'd betray me. I chalked it up to stress or a rough patch in our marriage. Then, the small red flags I'd ignored became impossible to overlook. Evan was out late more often, and when he was home, he was glued to his phone, protective of it as if it was a lifeline. Affection dwindled, and I felt him check out of our relationship. The breaking point came when I started seeing strange charges on our credit card, dinners and hotel stays that I clearly wasn't a part of. I questioned my instincts, wondering if I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was off. One night, I took a chance and grabbed his phone while he was in the shower. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Texts from a girl named Dana, a 27-year-old intern at his company. Their conversations were sickeningly romantic, like they were a fresh couple in love. I learned the affair had been going on for 8 months. When I confronted Evan, he didn't even deny it. He claimed our marriage had been failing for a while and that he felt neglected, which shocked me. I thought we were navigating the usual ups and downs, but apparently I was wrong. Feeling furious and humiliated, I spent weeks alternating between crying and rage. I refused to let him get away with this. I gathered every piece of evidence I could. Screenshots of their texts, credit card statements, even online photos of him with Dana. I consulted a divorce attorney who advised me to document everything, and I made sure to do just that. I deserved better after everything I had sacrificed for him and our marriage. Then I devised a plan. I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions. I decided to throw a surprise anniversary party, but the surprise would be the reveal of his affair. I invited both our families and some close friends, framing it as a special celebration of our 3rd wedding anniversary. It felt twisted, but I didn't care anymore. He needed to be exposed. When the day came, the house was filled with guests. My parents, his parents, our siblings and friends, who all saw us as the perfect couple. Evan arrived completely oblivious, smiling as if nothing was wrong. I felt sick just looking at him, but I kept my composure. When the moment arrived, I thanked everyone for coming and teased a surprise. Evan looked puzzled, and I connected my phone to the big screen, showcasing the screenshots of his messages with Dana. Gasps filled the room, and Evan's face drained of color. My mother started to cry, and his parents looked like they were witnessing a stranger. And then, as if on cue, Dana walked in, thinking she was arriving at a joyous occasion. When she realized what was happening, she froze. Evan stood there speechless as everyone stared in disbelief. I calmly announced that I was filing for divorce. I didn't scream or cry. I simply stated I was done and walked out, leaving him to face the fallout. My sister Alyssa was waiting for me outside, ready to take me home. The first thing I did the next morning was file for divorce, citing infidelity, armed with all the evidence I needed. Evan freaked out when he realized I was serious, trying to reach me through calls and texts, but by then, I had blocked him on everything. After everything that happened, Evan even showed up at Elisa's house a few times begging to talk to me. I just wouldn't budge. There really wasn't anything left to say. He kept trying to downplay the affair, claiming it was just a one-time mistake and that he was confused. But come on, 8 months of sneaking around isn't a mistake. It's a choice he made. I've already spoken with my lawyer and we're moving forward with the divorce. Of course, he's contesting it now, insisting we can work through this and begging for another chance. He even tried to convince me that his feelings for Dana weren't real, saying he was just going through some midlife crisis. He swore he still loved me and wanted to fix things. But honestly, I can't see how that's possible. Trust has been shattered, and I don't think I could ever look at him the same way again. I've made up my mind that I want out, but a part of me is second-guessing. I've invested so much into this relationship and our life together, and sometimes I wonder if I'm making the right choice by walking away. Should I stick to my guns and finalize the divorce, or is there any chance we could save this marriage? After the anniversary party, everything moved faster than I expected, yet at the same time, it felt like I was in slow motion. Evan kept trying to reach out, even showing up at Elisa's place a few more times, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let him gaslight me into thinking this was just a simple mistake we could get over. I pushed forward with the divorce as quickly as I could. My lawyer was incredible. She laid everything out clearly and made sure I had all the evidence we needed. But Evan wasn't making it easy. He contested the divorce, dragging his feet, claiming he wanted to work things out and that he could change. It's funny how someone who spent nearly a year sneaking around suddenly wants to be the perfect husband the moment he gets caught. One major sticking point was, unsurprisingly, money. Evan's startup had really taken off recently, and while our financial situation was decent, it wasn't as straightforward as I hoped. He tried to lowball me, offering way less than what I was entitled to. It felt like he was punishing me for exposing him. His lawyer kept delaying everything, dragging the process out, probably hoping I'd get exhausted and give up. But if there's one thing I've learned about myself, it's that I don't give up easily. The biggest contention was about his startup. Evan claimed that since it was his baby, I shouldn't have any claim to it, but I had supported him through all the tough times, both emotionally and financially. I was there when he doubted himself and encouraged him to keep going, so yes, I wanted my fair share. I wasn't going to let him act like I hadn't played a part in his success. As the divorce was processing, news of the affair leaked at his company. I'm not sure how it got out, but I won't lie. It felt a bit satisfying. The news spread quickly, and soon enough, people were whispering about him at work. HR got involved, especially when they found out Dana was an intern. There are always discussions about power imbalances and inappropriate relationships in the workplace, and Evan's affair definitely crossed several lines. Dana was fired a few weeks later, and it wasn't a quiet exit. Evan's reputation took a hit too. Investors started getting nervous. Nobody wants to back a CEO with a scandal hanging over their head. His employees were losing respect for him, and morale plummeted. His once thriving startup began to struggle, and for the first time, he wasn't looking like the golden boy anymore. I felt a bit sorry for Dana. Even though she was involved with my husband, she was young and likely impressionable, and Evan had clearly taken advantage of that. As for me, I started to feel an odd sense of relief. The anger and heartbreak were still there, but once the divorce papers were in motion and I cut Evan off completely, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I wasn't trapped in a loveless marriage anymore. The constant worry and anxiety about where he was or what he was doing faded away. I began focusing on myself for the first time in what felt like years. I won't lie, there were dark days. I questioned everything, whether I had been a good enough wife or if I missed the signs. I wondered if I had done something wrong. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the text messages and those late nights, and my resolve would harden again. He didn't just make a mistake. He made a series of choices to betray me, and that wasn't my fault. A few months passed, and while I wasn't actively looking for love again, I started casually dating. It felt strange at first, meeting new people and getting back out there, but it was a distraction and reminded me that I was still young and had a lot to offer. I wasn't going to let Evan define me. Meanwhile, Evan was doing everything he could to win me back. He sent flowers to Elisa's house, showed up with handwritten letters, and even roped in some of our mutual friends to talk me into giving him another chance. They told me he was genuinely sorry and realized he'd made a huge mistake. Some even suggested that every marriage has its rough patches and that maybe I should consider counseling. But honestly, how many more chances should I give him? I'm not sure what I was supposed to give him. He never once slipped up. For 8 months, he carried on with his affair, lying to my face every single day. No amount of flowers or apologies could change that. I remained resolute about moving forward with the divorce despite his increasingly desperate attempts at reconciliation. One night, he even showed up at Alyssa's house, drunk, banging on the door and demanding to see me. That moment made it clear to me that things were only going to escalate. I knew I had to stay strong, but it was challenging with him pulling these stunts. Some days I questioned whether it would just be easier to give in, if only to find some peace. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, and how he made me feel like I wasn't enough. As the divorce dragged on, Evan's behavior became more erratic. It was as if he couldn't accept that I was serious about leaving him. One night, after going out, nothing serious, just trying to put myself out there, I noticed Evan's car parked down the street from Alyssa's house. He was just sitting there, watching. I felt uneasy but tried to brush it off as a coincidence. But then it happened again, and again. He wasn't overtly threatening, but knowing he was following me made me feel on edge. I didn't want to involve the police just yet, but I started to think it might become necessary. Every time I went out, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, which was emotionally exhausting. I confided in Alyssa, and she was furious. Meanwhile, my nights were punctuated by drunk dials from Evan. Like clockwork, my phone would ring around midnight. I had blocked him, but he found ways to call from different numbers. Burner phones, maybe? Each call was the same, him slurring apologies or begging for another chance. I never answered and eventually turned my phone off at night to get some peace. But it was clear he wasn't going to let go. Then the threats started. Not violent, but subtle enough to make me uneasy. He left voicemails saying things like, "If you keep this up, people are going to know things you don't want them to." Or, "I wouldn't want your little secrets to come out." What secrets? I had nothing to hide, but the fact that he went there showed me how unhinged he had become. I was furious that he thought he could manipulate me with fear, but more than anything, I was just exhausted. Evan's parents got involved, complicating matters further. One evening, his mom called, trying to play peacemaker. She insisted that Evan was broken, and I should reconsider my decision. She mentioned that every marriage goes through tough times, and implied that I hadn't met his needs, as if his affair was somehow my fault. I shut that down immediately. I made it clear that nothing justified his actions, yet she pressed on, asking if I really wanted to throw away all the time we had invested in our marriage. It became apparent that their concern was more about family reputation than my well-being. Things escalated when they started offering financial incentives for me to withdraw the divorce petition. Yes, you heard that right. They offered to take care of me if I agreed to stay with Evan, suggesting they'd buy me a new car and pay off my debts, which mostly stemmed from supporting his business. They even hinted at a substantial gift that could set me up for life. Essentially, they were trying to buy my silence and loyalty. My family, however, was having none of it. Alyssa stood up to them when they showed up at her house trying to talk to me. My parents were furious too, especially after hearing about Evan's creepy behavior and his family's attempts to manipulate me. They made it clear they supported my decision wholeheartedly and urged me to cut all ties with him. Then, one day, Evan crashed a family gathering for my cousin's birthday. It was just a small, low-key celebration at my parents' house, and I still don't know how he found out where we were. He showed up uninvited, holding a bouquet of flowers and a giant balloon that said, "I'm sorry," as if that could fix everything. My dad answered the door and nearly lost it when he saw Evan, telling him to leave immediately. Evan insisted on talking to me, claiming he needed just 5 minutes to explain himself. The whole family had gathered by then, and I could see the embarrassment on Evan's face, not the right kind of embarrassment, but the kind that came from losing control of the narrative. He made this grand public gesture, getting down on one knee and begging me to forgive him. It was straight out of a bad rom-com, but instead of being charming, it was just pathetic. He went on about how much he loved me, how he couldn't live without me, and how he'd do anything to win me back. The more he talked, the more ridiculous it became. My cousin even started laughing at the absurdity of it all. I stayed silent, arms crossed, while my dad told him again to leave. Finally, Alyssa stepped in, threatening to call the cops if he didn't go. I managed to get him to back off, but not before he threw a fit and tossed the flowers on the ground. Watching him storm off like a child made me more determined to never go back to him. My lawyer suggested I think about filing for a restraining order. At first, I wasn't sure if it was needed. Evan hadn't been violent, just sad and clingy. But as I thought about it, I realized his behavior was getting worse. He was trying to wear me down and make me feel trapped. If I didn't set some boundaries now, who knew what he might do next? The divorce got messier, especially after a family event. Evan's lawyer started playing dirty, dragging things out, but I wasn't going to give up. Meanwhile, Evan's company was struggling. His distraction from the divorce and the public fallout from his affair were hurting him. Investors were pulling out, especially after Dana got fired. His good reputation was ruined, and it felt like everything was about to fall apart. Then, out of nowhere, Evan's sister contacted me. She was one of the few family members who never pressured me to stay with him, and I appreciated that. She told me she was worried about Evan. His drinking was getting worse, and he was becoming unstable. He was missing important meetings and was close to losing everything. His parents were concerned too, but didn't know how to help. She asked if I could meet him just once for closure because she was afraid he might do something reckless if I didn't. I figured if I met him, at least it would be on record with my lawyer. I agreed to meet, but only in a public place and with Alyssa by my side. There was no way I was facing him alone. We chose to meet at a mall, a busy spot where I felt safe. Alyssa came along for support, but stayed in the background while I talked to Evan. When I walked in and saw him sitting at a corner table, I was shocked. He looked terrible. Thinner, messy hair and dark circles under his eyes. For a second, I felt sorry for him, but I quickly remembered that this was his doing. He was paying for his own actions. As soon as I sat down, he apologized again, but this time it felt different. He seemed genuinely broken. He begged for another chance, saying he made the biggest mistake of his life and didn't realize what he was losing until it was too late. He started crying and people began to stare, but I stayed calm. I had seen this before. Even if the tears were real this time, it was too late for me to care. I told him that there was no way we could reconcile. Trust, once broken, couldn't be fixed, and in our case, it was destroyed. I explained that I wasn't the same person anymore and didn't want to be with someone who disrespected me. He didn't take it well. His desperation turned to anger, and he accused me of being heartless. He said I was throwing everything away and that I was overreacting. He even suggested that maybe it was partly my fault for not being attentive enough. That's when Alyssa stepped in. She had been watching from a nearby table and couldn't stay quiet any longer. She walked over and firmly told him to stop blaming me. She reminded him that he was the one who cheated and lost everything because of his choices. Evan broke down again, but this time it felt more real. He admitted he didn't know how to live without me and hated himself for what he had done. He said his affair with Dana wasn't about love, it was about his ego. He liked the attention from someone younger. He thought he could have both me at home and his fling, but now he realized how wrong he was. For the first time, it seemed like Evan was taking responsibility. But even that didn't change anything for me. His apology didn't erase the pain. It was too little, too late. I told him I accepted his apology but was moving on with my life and he needed to do the same. As Alyssa and I left, I looked back and saw him sitting there, head in his hands, completely broken. After that, I blocked his number for good. I deleted everything about him from my social media and changed my phone number. I wanted to make sure he couldn't contact me again. I was done. I stopped fighting the divorce. I think that talk at the mall really changed him. He finally saw that no amount of apologies could fix what he broke. My lawyer and I quickly worked out a fair settlement. In the end, I got what I deserved. Nothing more, nothing less. I made sure I wasn't taken advantage of, but I didn't want to drag things out. Ever since the affair went public, his company has struggled. He sold off a large part of it just to keep it going. Although he still works there, his reputation has really suffered. I heard from someone we both know that he's no longer the golden boy of the tech world. Karma, I guess. The divorce was finalized about 6 months ago. We signed the papers in separate rooms, and leaving the lawyer's office felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. 3 years of marriage and 5 years of my life were officially over. After that, I took some time for myself and started traveling to places I'd always wanted to see but couldn't because Evan was too busy. A few months later, I met someone new named David.